What are your thoughts on former President Donald Trump?
Well, I'm twofold on that. And, I'm just actually onefold. I don't believe there's a greater thing that you could ever do for anybody than to set them free. Whether that's from a physical prison or emotional one or a mental one, I don't care what it is. He, with one stroke of his pen, eliminated a 28-year sentence that was hanging over my head, and I walked out of prison. And so I thank him immensely. I want to meet him. I want to shake his hand. I want to talk to him. I've sent a letter. I've tried to, because I think it's deserving. I'm not as emotional about politics as people in the streets.
Did you have any idea he would commute your sentence?
I didn't have a realistic idea that you would call real, but I did have a faith idea. So for Donald Trump, all I can talk about is what he's done for me. I know it's a lot of people out there doing some other things and picketing, but hey, nobody else got me out of a cell and gave me freedom from that prison.
A man you know well, Fox 2's Josh Landon, was actually in the room where it happened and spoke with us earlier tonight, saying it was intense right from the beginning. He dove into the reaction when Trump made those comments.
It got a lot of people upset, a lot of people heated. We're talking about Vice President Kamala Harris, whose name was mispronounced once or twice during that conversation, as I'm sure everyone has heard by now. We're talking about the vice president who went to Howard University in HBCU. She's from Oakland, California. She's from the inner city. Therefore, to make those claims, I can understand why a lot of journalists, black journalists in the crowd, would be offended by some of those statements.
What?
And that's just a tidbit of her background.
Was there any applause? Were there boos? How would you say, what was the beginning, the middle, and the end like, the parts that we weren't able to see?
You had a few folks who applaud. You had a few supporters in the crowd. One was in front of me. I believe she said, "That's my president," as he walked out to begin the conversation. You heard maybe 2 or 3 claps to my right, maybe 2 or 3 claps to my left. They were very spread out. It wasn't overwhelming boos, and it wasn't overwhelming claps either. But definitely, I want to stick with the word intense, uncomfortable. You could feel the tension in the room. One statement someone said to me, adjacent to me, "This is wild," as we are watching it live. Because a lot of journalists, you've covered Trump, you've interviewed Trump, but a lot of journalists, this was their first time seeing former President Donald Trump live in action up front.
Good to see you as always, Shannon. Here in Michigan, we're calling this weekend the Michigan Marathon, with both campaigns in this state drastically. Does one campaign have a slightly bigger challenge to seal the deal on Election Day, more so than the other?
Well, you guys are a huge prize, and you are in the spotlight, and you're right. You're going to be bombarded until the finish line, however long that takes. The most recent polling shows a little bit of an advantage ticking towards, it looks like, the vice president. We know Democrats have had challenges there in Michigan because there have been a number of people unhappy with the way the administration has handled the war in Gaza, prompting a lot of folks to just completely vote uncommitted during the primary, and to really voice a lot of concern since then. But President Trump will say that he's made inroads there. He hopes with auto workers, with union workers, even if the top of the union leadership is not with him. So you guys are going to make us, chew all of our nails off. I think it's coming down to the finish line there in Michigan.
With that being said, Shannon, word about a ceasefire potentially again in the Middle East. If that were to happen, not to get ahead of ourselves, but if that were to happen leading up to the election or right before the election, is there a possibility that could sway one way or the other, or is it possibly too late?
Yeah, it's a great question. We know that across the country, 65 million Americans have already voted. So a lot of people have already made their decisions based on the information they have. But a bulk of people are going to wait for Election Day. Listen, it would be for President Biden's legacy, for getting those hostages home. I mean, it would be such a positive thing for that ceasefire to happen. I think nearly everybody agrees, to put an end to the suffering there. And maybe that would sway some voters there in Michigan who that's been their top issue, and they've been demanding and waiting for action.
Absolutely. Also, you look at the many scenarios of what it takes to win, and Michigan appears to be in every scenario for Kamala Harris. Without Michigan, she cannot win. Is that the same for former President Trump?
And, you know, his team seems some other paths. Of course, they would love to put Michigan on their plate, on their winning side of the table. But they do see other options, potentially with Nevada and Arizona, North Carolina, Georgia. They feel like there's some other coalitions they may be able to put together. But Democrats are feeling very good about that blue wall. They feel good about the latest numbers out of Michigan, and they believe that the vice president is going to be able to have that one in her column come Tuesday night or whenever the dust settles on the votes.
Absolutely. Who do you have coming up this Sunday, Shannon?
We have got Congresswoman Elise Stefanik out of New York, one of the top Trump surrogates, but also there are several House races there in New York that could impact the balance of whether the power flips there in the House. We've also got out of critical battleground state, Senator Mark Kelly out of Arizona. They too have a tough Senate race there, and of course the top of the ticket. We'll talk about that and all the other battlegrounds out there too.
It's always a great show. We'll see you on Sunday, Shannon. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
City Council President Mary Sheffield, we are acknowledging 5 years since the People's Bills have been established. Let's start off by asking, how do you feel about them?
I feel great. I feel inspired by the stories that I've heard personally.
When this effort began initially, the City Council President says some of the challenges included addressing social issues such as poverty, employment, and affordable housing.
Because sometimes when you address, poverty, it doesn't necessarily bring in any type of revenue for the city, or it's not a economic issue.
Where do we stand between downtown and the neighborhoods at this particular moment? That is still an ongoing conversation. Gentrification is an ongoing conversation.
Which is why I created the Neighborhood Improvement Fund. When the Pistons moved here back in 2017, that was a big issue. A portion of the income tax from the players and all of the employees in the arena goes into a fund, and it can only be used outside of downtown and midtown. And to date, we have raised $1 million, have went to over 80 organizations and community groups throughout our neighborhoods.
Property taxes, they're high, extremely high compared to surrounding communities. What's being done to combat that problem?
So, we have been looking at this issue for quite some time. I had issued a report from our Legislative Policy Division to really do research on where we stand, and we have some of the highest property taxes in the country. And so we're looking internally, how do we reform the property tax system from a legislative standpoint, but also we know that the mayor is proposing something called the land value tax, where he's reducing about 14 mills overall, where Detroiters would see a 17% reduction in property taxes.
The land value tax is something Detroiters will have to vote on going into the election season. Meanwhile, some progress is being made with Right to Counsel.
I think roughly 30,000 individuals were facing eviction when I started this journey of Right to Counsel, and we've been able to see the impact of having an attorney go with you to court to fight for you to save your home.
When it comes to fighting, the council president says she's inspired by striking UAW workers.
I am so inspired by what is taking place with the UAW and everyday workers and the fight for dignity and respect, for a living wage, for health care, and for benefits. And so we're taking up an ordinance called responsible contracting, which means that if you come to the city and you do any type of work through the contracting process, we will incentivize and give you points in your bidding process if you pay living wages, if you provide pension and health care benefits. And we want to make sure that you're properly training your employees.
Council President Sheffield goes on to say a livable wage today is at least $20 an hour to help build the middle class.
We can tout jobs. Oh, we have this many jobs in Detroit, but are they sustainable jobs? Are they careers? Are they paying livable wages? That is what we want to hone in on moving forward.
Low-cost funding. We bail out.
In this one-on-one conversation with Hill Harper, he takes us to the intersection of Oakland and Owen in Detroit's North End. Why did you choose this location?
You know, Josh, I chose this location because when I get off I-75 to come home, I come up and I take a right on Oakland, and then I have to take a left right here at Owen. And it was a number of weeks ago, I just stopped and sort of got emotional.
It's easy to become emotional when standing at a location symbolizing decay and challenges.
Harper shedding light on the urgent need for change, community growth, and leadership.
Just look around. You have boarded up, kind of bombed out building to the left. You have Eli's Produce kind of faded right here on that building, and then you look across the street, an empty lot. And here on this side, a liquor store where folks who are on SNAP assistance, government assistance, come in through 3 inches of plexiglass. They can only buy Funyuns, Faygo, or Verner's, and there's no fresh produce anywhere around here.
Critical issues that in many ways remain ignored in urban communities. But this candidate for the U.S. Senate believes he can make a difference. What do you say to the critics who question your qualifications?
Well, I mean, a couple different things. I'll put my resume up against anybody. Harvard Law School, JD, Kennedy School of Government, appointed by President Barack Obama to the President's Cancer Panel. We made recommendations to the White House around cancer policy.
Nevertheless, it's a big challenge for the actor, author, and activist who is seeking change in politics. What motivated you to make this transition?
You know, this. You know, our government can't solve everybody's problems, and it shouldn't. But this year, our federal government budget is estimated to be around $6.2 trillion. $6.2 trillion, and we have communities that are choked out like this.
Here's part of Harper's response when we presented the question of laying out an actual game plan if elected.
Literally stand there on the Senate floor and say, things aren't going to move forward until we take care of constituency groups like this, until we figure out a way that people can get a loan to open up a business in here, open up a business there, redevelop that corner. There has to be more options than liquor stores that sell zero fresh produce in communities.
Whomever is elected, they will indeed have big shoes to fill, as Senator Debbie Stabenow will retire after serving in the Senate for more than 2 decades.
I have a great deal of respect for her, and what's fantastic about that is that it also reminds me of another great Michigan senator, Phil Hart, whoever wins this Senate seat is going to interestingly sit in the Phil Hart building, their office, the junior senator's office.
And one of my final questions for Hill Harper during our time at the intersection of Oakland and Owen. Since you began this journey,
yes,
have you received support or full support from the Democratic Party?
You know, unfortunately, it seems that Washington and the Washington establishment wants to pick who Michigan's next senator is, rather than allowing the people the full right, the people of Michigan, the full right to evaluate candidates and pick. So they are literally putting their thumb, or attempting to put their thumb on the scale.